You're part of the morning majority. The Grandy Group. Fred Grandy, Brian Neiman on 630 WMAL.
8:37 on the Grandy Group.
Well, we had to go for a whole week without Larry Kudlow's advice, and not
for me.
surprisingly, the market tanked. But happily, he is back. Larry Kudlow, you know, is the host of CNBC's primetime Kudlow Report, 7 to 8. And, of course, right here, he is the host of the Larry Kudlow Show, which you can hear on Saturdays on WMAL.
Which is not just a good show, it's a great show.
All right, there you go. Larry, what more do you need?
You're very nice.
No, it really is.
That. I truly do.
Let me ask you something. I don't know if you've had a chance, but he was just on our program. But the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Dave Camp, usually a low-profile guy, but was on the Deficit Commission and has a lot of budget reform on his plate. What is your impression of him?
Oh, I think the world of him. I've interviewed him several times in the last, 3 months, 4 months?
Yeah.
And I spoke down, Art Laffer and I spoke at the Republican House retreat down in Baltimore, and I had a chance to visit with Dave. And I think he's really, he's got that youthful energy. He was in business. He knows a lot about the tax picture. So that's very impressive.
But the reason I bring that up is because we asked him, and on both subjects he said yes. The first one was, will entitlements be on the table sooner rather than later? Answer, yes. And then I went, maybe anticipating your interview, what about tax reform? How much does that have to be part of budget reform? And he said, as far as I'm concerned, it is part of budget reform.
Right. Part of my conversations with Mr. Camp and others, I was out last week, but I did have a chance to talk with Eric Kenner and John Boehner, is my plea that the Republican Party have a full-blown growth message. And that includes the budget cuts, which is essential to slim down government. But it also includes new incentives with lower marginal tax rates and a flatter base. And that's why I'm glad to hear that Mr. Camp is keen on it. I also think they should have a regulatory freeze or moratorium for businesses. So there's the end game here is spur the economy and grow jobs. That has to be the end game, and I think it needs a whole across-the-board package of spending, tax, and regulatory reform. And by the way, just for the heck of it, with Ben Bernanke testifying today, how about a little dollar reform? Does anybody care? The dollar is its lowest level in 4 months. Inflationary pressures are creeping up everywhere. How about that, too?
What did you make of Boehner's message on Sunday night? I took it as saying, essentially, we're not going to have a government shutdown. We're going to make a deal with the Democrats, but we're going to get really serious in the next budget, and that includes entitlement reforms and deep cuts. Did I see it the way you see it, or you're seeing it?
Yeah, when I spoke to the speaker on Friday, and I talked a little bit about it on the radio Saturday, his take is they don't want a shutdown. That's really not what good is that going to do at this stage of the game? But he said, look, we have these budget cuts, $60 billion, and if the Democrats won't take a whole loaf, then we're going to feed it to them one slice at a time. That was his take, and I like that, and I think that is correct, and I think the GOP is going to keep coming back. I think it's what the public wants. But let me say, to me, budget cuts and shrinking the size of government back towards 20% of GDP from its current 25% is an essential growth measure.
Right.
Let me take you in another direction. Obviously, that we've been talking about for some time, certainly since Egypt and now Libya began to topple, and that was the whole question of oil. I happened to be at a security briefing over the weekend, and we were talking about Saudi Arabia and whether or not on March 11th, the so-called Day of Rage, there could be something really serious that could jeopardize the northern oil fields. How important is protecting those oil fields to the future of our economy?
Incalculably important. Incalculably important. And you're right about March 11th. We had Karen Elliott House on. She's a Saudi expert, Pulitzer Prize winner, Wall Street Journal, writing another book, and Dan Senor, and we talked about this last night. Look, here's a disconcerting thing. The stock market in Saudi Arabia fell almost 7% today, and over the last 3 days it's dropped 11.6%. And the ruling family, Abdullah and so forth, are promising some kind of political reform through a cabinet reshuffle. But what the young people want there, they don't necessarily want to overturn the royal family. What they do want is a constitutional monarchy with a freely elected assembly. They want this legislature, it's called the Shura, to be freely elected. And if nothing happens on that front between now and, March 11th, it's only 2 weeks, 10 days, there could be problems. The Jasmine Revolution could conceivably spread to Saudi Arabia.
But if it does spread, it's going to come over the bridge from Bahrain, I would assume, and those are Shiite fundamentalists like Iran.
Well, that may be. Now, this is a Sunni country. There's Shia problems there. I'm not sure, though, that that's the issue. I mean, the Wahhabis basically have a real hold on Saudi Arabia. I think I see this more at the moment in terms of setting up some kind of representative government through this freely elected shura, this assembly. That's what they seem to want. But of course, they produce 25% of the world's oil, and therefore, if you think $100 a barrel is high, the risks, as I say, are you could go to $200 a barrel. I'm not trying to be an alarmist. I'm just trying to say keep your eyes open because the Saudi story may just be warming up.
The Egyptian stock market reopened today, right?
Yes.
And did that have any effect on what Saudi Arabia's stock market did?
I don't know. I don't know what the heck happened to the Egyptian stock market.
There was also this. Correct me. I've never heard of this before. The Institute for Supply Management, Chicago Incorporated.
Yeah,
okay,
the purchasing manager.
Okay, those numbers came out yesterday. Were off the charts.
Boom.
Good.
Manufacturing has turned out to be about the strongest part of this economic recovery, and manufacturing is growing at about a 5 to 6% rate. It is the backbone of the recovery, along with some, decent capital spending going on, new investment spending by business. This is all to the good.
What exactly are we making, though? Because, if you look at the press, we've shipped it all overseas. What's actually being made in this country?
Don't read the press. In fact, go back to the Wall Street Journal op-ed page of, I guess it was Friday, my friend Mark Perry, University of Michigan professor, now in residence at the American Enterprise Institute. We are producing across the board everything. We're doing a great job at much lower job levels because the productivity is so high.
Yeah.
We are producing everything right now. And by the way, there's a boom going on in technology. There's a boom going on in transportation equipment. Mm-hmm. There's a boom going on in replacements for business capex all across the board. But in that Chicago Purchasing Managers Report, the prices paid component is also stuck up at the high. It's 80 on the index, 80. So it's been at 80 for the last 2 months. So you have these cost inflation pressures that may dampen business profit margins. It's all because of the roaring commodity story. It's oil, it's food, it's raw materials. It is a weak dollar. So, we've got a nice little mini boom going on. The question is, will we cause inflation to knock it down? And when's the Fed going to get realistic about its unnecessary pump priming?
Well, I'm sure Ben Bernanke will be asked about that today. Larry, always good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
Larry Kudlow, host of CNBC's Kudlow Reports. You can hear him or watch him at 7 o'clock on CNBC and hear him on the weekend, Saturday nights, 7 o'clock, right here on